This is the Landlording Show. My name is Tim Harstead. I own and operate Chicago Style Management. We are a third-party management company that helps investors manage their properties, specifically on the south side of Chicago and the southern suburbs of Chicagoland. We focus on a lot of C&D property and have tons of experience dealing with all the issues that you can think of when it comes to investing with your property and making sure that your property is staying profitable. If you ever decide that you no longer want to self-manage and you want to make your investment go passive, we'd be happy to talk to you. Give us a call. We'd love to see how we can help you manage your property to make it more profitable and more passive for you, so it is a great investment for your retirement and not a second job. Now, with that being said, I want to get into today's episode. We are going to talk about the different classes of properties and how they vary for you. So first off, really quickly, what is a property class? The way that I look at it is an A-class property is in the most affluent of areas. A D-class property is in a much poorer area. Often, also to go along with that, the A-class properties are going to be newer, built better, have less problems, whereas the D-class properties may be 100, 120 years old. We're going to have problems. They're going to have a lot of skeletons in the closets that you need to make your way through. Now, here's the silver lining and why so many people buy C and D class properties. One is they're just straight up cheaper, right? You can buy a property for $50,000 or $100,000, whereas an A class property, an A class condo might cost $300,000 or $400,000 just for a condo, not even a property or a multi-unit property, right? So that is part of it. The other part is rate of return. Over the long term, a 5 to 10 year period, if you were to look at an A-class property, you are going to pay more money for that property, and your monthly return is going to be pretty steady, but the reward, when everything goes right, will not be as high as a C or D-class property, which you can buy. But the risk, so you're going to get much more money on a C or D class property if everything goes right, but the chances of everything not going right are much higher. So an A class is less risk, less reward. A D class is a whole lot more risk, but a whole lot more reward if things go right. So let's talk about a few things when handling A class, C, B class, C class, D class. First of all, I want to touch on some misconceptions that I get way too often when it comes to C and D class. The first one is that because you buy the property for cheap, you won't have to put money into the property. A lot of these properties are 80 to 100 years old. A lot of them have roofs that are falling apart and need to be replaced. The rehab is going to be higher cost because they haven't been done in so long. And you don't want to be a slumlord, because that's the number one way to guarantee that you're going to get bad tenants and you're going to lose in this game. We want to make sure that the buildings are a nice place to live, even though they are in lesser desirable neighborhoods. We want to make sure that the quality of the home inside, once they unlock that door, is of highest regard. And this is going to help you to make sure that you have the best property and make the most money with the C and D class. So we've had some clients come to us and say, hey, I bought this $50,000 home and I see that it's returning $1,500 a month. This is going to be amazing. Let's just do it. And, we walk the property and realize that, hey, yes, all that's possible, but we need to put $30,000 into it first. And they're shocked by it. So if you're just getting into this game, please know that the reason you're getting a property for $50,000 is because there's work that needs to be done. Now, if you go outside of Chicagoland, if you go in the South into where properties are $10,000 or $15,000, and that is the average price of a property, that's a little bit different. But in Chicago, a home on the South side of Chicago, even in neighborhoods like Inglewood and on the west side, it's still going to cost you $150,000 if the property's in good condition. So if you're buying it for less than that, know you're going to have to put more work in. So the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to the differences is going to be the differences when it comes to screening tenants. So when you have an A-class property, remember your risk is very low. And in order to keep that very low, because it's a very desirable neighborhood and because the price of the home is so high, you can require a much higher credit score. So we can require a 650, 700, 750 credit score, and we will find renters with those credit scores because there are people that want to live there and don't want to buy a home. And the reason's either because they can't afford to buy a home and rent is cheaper in those areas, or, they are a working professional that is just passing through the city and is only going to be living here for a year or two, or they're going to school at DePaul or UIC or Loyola, Evanston, Northwestern, I should say. These are reasons why A-class tenants are looking to rent. So they will have better credit because you're looking for someone that is more established. When it comes to C and D class properties, rent is going to be much higher than owning a home. That means I could go and buy a house and have a mortgage of $800 a month, but my rent's $1,500. So why would I rent if I could buy and save money? Well, the answer is I don't have the credit and I don't have the job history that it requires to buy a home. So that is the number one reason why you have renters in C and D class properties in those areas, is because they don't have the credit to buy a home. Because otherwise it just wouldn't make sense. They could buy the house next door and have a mortgage cheaper than the rent for your 2-bedroom apartment in a 2-flat. So they just want to do it. So we have to lower what we're looking for. So often in a C class, we're looking for a 550 credit score. We're looking for a 500 credit score in a D class. Now, with that being said, we are looking for people that have had rough times and bad situations and not bad people. So we want to make sure that they have not been evicted before. We want to make sure that they are paying the bills that we want to see them pay first. So we don't want to see utility bills and collections. We don't want to see any kind of housing and collections. We want to see that their credit is bad because medical bills, because of bad choices. They decided to buy some things that they really couldn't afford, but they chose to pay their rent and let the credit card go and give them bad credit. So those are the type of people we want. We want good people in bad situations, because those are the people that are going to either pay their rent, or if things go bad, they're going to move out on their own because they have the pride to do that. And they're not going to hold up your apartment and cause you not to have rent for an entire year because, they want you to pay for their rent. So we're looking for past history with old landlords. We're looking for credit, not just the score, but also what's going on with the credit score. Why is it so low? And then for jobs, we are looking for at least 1 year at the same job, unless they have a good reason. So if you see someone was making $30,000 and got a $50,000 job somewhere else, that's a good reason to leave. But if you see someone every 3 to 4 months is just leaving their job, but making the same amount of money, doing the same thing, they're probably getting fired a lot. There's probably going to be a lot of times where they are behind on rent because they lost their job again. So we want to make sure that their job is secure, and we want to make sure we're checking for that. So that's the screening process. Again, when it comes to A class, you are going to be able to require that 700 credit score. We're going to look for a couple years on a job, or a new professional that is in a situation where they just got out of college and got a good job that's going to pay well, and it's secure. Whereas C and D class, we're looking more for just as much stability as possible. And again, we're looking to read in between the lines of those credit scores, even though they're not going to be high. Someone has a lot of medical debt, things like that. Those are good tenants that had a rough time, and maybe they didn't pay their rent at the other place, or maybe they have to move because the home's getting foreclosed on because things are happening in their life. And we want to create a home for them where they can come in and get their life straight and hopefully one day buy a home. That's really the goal with, when you're with renters, is to get them a loving home that they can have their family in, and then one day move out. whether that's buying a home or moving up to a higher end property. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about finishes, right? So when you have an A-class property, you have a 50th floor overseeing the Lake Michigan in Lincoln Park or in downtown in Gold Coast, you're going to have some things on there such as, water dispensers on a fridge, a jacuzzi tub, higher end light fixtures, things like that are going to be required to get the most rent. And because the tenants are looking for those, you need to put those in. With a C and D class property, we need everything to be working. Anything that is in there has to work, which means if we can get away and rent it without it, so meaning, for instance, a garbage disposal. Most people aren't actually looking for those and when they rent out a property. So we can skip things like that. A garbage disposal, water dispenser, ice maker on a fridge, jacuzzi tubs, things like that we don't want to put in there because if we do, we're going to have to spend money to fix them because they're going to break and we're not going to get any returns. We're not going to be able to rent the property for more money because we put those things in. So we want to look at anytime we're installing something, can we rent the property for a higher amount because we added it? So some things on a C and D class that you're going to want to actually put in is going to be granite countertops or even sometimes quartz countertops. We're going to want to make sure that everything in the property is clean. There's no pests. There's no holes in the wall, no bumps in the wall. We want clean, smooth walls that these tenants are going to move into. We want to make sure all the windows have screens. We want to make sure all the windows open properly. The heat, the HVAC, air conditioning, all of that is working properly. The key word when you are rehabbing a C or D class property is everything is working properly. So the more you put into it now before the tenant moves in, the less problems you're going to have. And it's way easier to fix a problem before a tenant's there than after the tenant moved in. So we want to make a property where when you walk in, you would feel comfortable living there. That's the best way I can say it. But we don't need to go and put in high-end finishes. We don't need to install marble. We don't need to install a jacuzzi tub. Another one that's a good upgrade, the rain faucets for the shower. Those things are inexpensive comparatively to what you can get back in return. So I would still install stuff like that and make it a luxurious experience for these C and D class properties without breaking the bank. So those are some things, and that's something that we'll talk about on another episode, some things that you can install to make your properties feel and look better, but don't break the bank. So that's a different episode, so I won't go too far into it, but just the specific things that you put into a property are going to be a little bit different when you're looking at an A class versus a C class. And I'm going to use A and C throughout this episode to talk and to go over them. But it's just really a scale, right? So if I'm saying a 700 score on an A and a 550 on a C, well, a D class is a 500 credit score. A B class is going to be a 600 credit score. So it all goes in that scale. A C class, you might want to do granite. A B class, you might want to do quartz. And A class, you'll do marble. So those are just things. Everything is going to be on a scale. Now, another thing to look at with C and D class properties is going to be focusing on marketing to Section 8 or to other subsidies that can help pay rent. So again, we're looking for good people in bad situations. We want someone that may be hard on luck, that had to file and get CHA, had to file and get Heartland Alliance is a company we've used a lot. Catholic Charities. There's a lot of these charities that will help tenants find homes. And so having a mix of that in your property is good because it's going to be a guaranteed rent. With that being said, I do not like to, if I have a 3-unit building, I don't necessarily want all 3 units to be subsidy. Sometimes you can't control it with, you don't always get to pick, but I want to advertise to everyone. So I get a couple market tenants, get a couple subsidy tenants, because sometimes the government runs out of money. Sometimes the government's late on paying. Sometimes things go wrong with the government that are out of our control, and they're happening in DC and nothing to do with us here in Illinois. So we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. Now, again, with any kind of subsidy program, we still want to make sure we're screening the tenants. We still want to make sure that we are talking to previous landlords and making sure that the tenants are good people that we're putting in there, because we don't want them destroying the house, because the rent's going to be there. But if you put in a tenant that has a history of setting homes on fire, once the fire happens, it's not going to be good for your profit and loss statements when you have to rebuild everything. So that's that we want to still screen tenants, even if we're using subsidies, even if we're using Section 8. You still want to screen and do background checks on those tenants. Make sure you're putting in good people, and having some of that in your building will allow you to make sure all your eggs are in one basket and make it less likely that you fall out and have a month where you're not getting rent from everyone. Now, inspections are something that we need to make sure we're doing. Just because something's a C or D class, you still need to make sure that the lawn is mowed. You still need to make sure the snow is shoveled. A lot of times we get this misconception that in these neighborhoods we have to do less. When it comes to management, it's actually more heavy on the touches, right? So we want to make sure that we're cleaning the property more often. We want to advise by broken window theory. So broken window theory states that if you have a broken window, tenants are more likely to not take care of the home because they say you're not taking care of the home. Whereas if the lawn is perfectly pristine and everything is well taken care of and all the hallways are perfectly clean, then the tenants are more likely to keep their units perfectly clean. And that's just going to mean that they're taking care of it. They stay longer, because when you have 3 units and all 3 tenants are taking care of their property, they're more likely to get along, not fight, not make each other want to move. It's less likely that there's going to be roaches and mice coming in, all those things. So we want to make sure that we are abiding by broken window theory, no matter if it's A class, B class, or C class. And really, that's a big thing I want to get through on this episode about if you are going to buy a C or D class property, know that you need to make sure that you're willing to go there every couple of weeks and clean the hallways, or hire someone that will. But also, if you are hiring someone that will, make sure that they are taking a look around the property and making sure that there's not repairs that need to be made, because a lot of times a simple roof repair could have cost you $1,000, but you miss it because no one's looking, and now it's costing you $20,000 because you have to replace the whole roof. So you want to squash the repairs when they're little repairs and not let them get too big. So who should invest in an A-class property? Who should invest in a C-class property? For me, an A-class property is a much safer bet. And if you do not have a lot of reserve behind you, if you are able to afford an A or B class property, but you barely can afford, but you're not going to be able to afford, having someone miss rent for 3 months, right? Those are the people that you want to do A and B, because it's much safer. You're less likely to have major expenses. You're more likely, if there is a major expense, to be able to get a loan on that expense, whether it be a roof or something like that, because of the area it's in. And so it's a safer bet. And if you are buying this property and you don't have the reserve to withstand 3-6 months of not getting paid rent while you're going through an eviction, then an A or B class is for you. You might not make as much, but over 10 years, you're going to cash flow consistently, and you are going to win more often than not. It's a lot harder to not make money off of A class, B class properties. Now, C and D class properties are more for the veterans, right? You are going to be able to make more money off of these when done right. But again, when you buy a $100,000 property, you want to make sure that you can afford the mortgage for a year. If something goes wrong, if you have to do an eviction and it takes 8 to 10 months, you want to make sure that you are able to put a new roof on that property and pay the mortgage and do all that, because if not, that's how you lose the property. That's how you end up owning a property that is negative cash flow, that Now you're getting foreclosed on by the mortgage. Now you have the city coming and give you violations because your roof's not fixed because you didn't have that backup money. But if you have that money to withhold the storm over 5 or 10 years, the rent is much more expensive. Again, we talked about why we can get tenants with better credit in A class versus C. Another way to look at that, when a tenant is able to buy the home next door, right? You can buy two properties. When you can buy the property next door, your mortgage is gonna be 800, but you can rent it out for 1,500 or 1,600 in a C or D class property. In an A class property, the home next door might be 800,000, but the ratio of how much rent you get, let's say the mortgage on that would be, 5,000 a month. You're probably only renting it for 5,000. Whereas in a C or D class property, the mortgage is 800 a month, but you're renting it for 1,500. So even if you lose an entire year of rent, you're going to make that money up, and you're going to be able to put that money back into buying more properties or store it for your retirement. And you're nuts, like a squirrel, storing. You'll be able to put it away for later. All those things. So you want to be able to buy a property that you can afford the maintenance on. If you're going to go C and D class, you need to be able to afford the maintenance and need to be able to afford the mortgage for a few months when rent's not coming in. If you can't do that, then you need to focus on A and B class, or focus on raising more funds and saving up more before you invest, in my opinion. So that's a quick lowdown from us on the difference between A, B, C, and D class. We'll jump in further episodes. We got some good episodes coming up that we'll have for you guys in the coming weeks. And I look forward to talking to you guys again soon. Thanks.